Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's jump right in. Today, we're unpacking something that I think is going to hit incredibly close to home for a lot of us. We're looking at how to navigate the absolute exhausting noise of our modern world, and we're doing it through the lens of a guy named Thomas Merton. His wisdom is timeless and honestly surprisingly relevant right now.
I mean, think about this for a second. What if the biggest problem in your life isn't actually that you have too much to do, but that you just have way too much noise inside your head? You probably know the exact feeling I'm talking about, right?
You wake up. Boom. You immediately check your phone. Messages, notifications, the news, work emails, money stuff, relationship drama, other people's opinions. It's just a lot. And just like that, before you've even had a chance to brush your teeth, it's like your brain has already sat through 10 different meetings. It is completely overwhelming. And the crazy part? We live in a world where this constant, frantic state of distraction is just considered normal. But let's just take a breath for a second. Slow it down. What actually happens when you finally become completely silent? Well, to figure that out, we need to look at Thomas Merton. He was born in France back in 1915, and his early life was all about travel and intellectual exploration, before he eventually ended up entering a Trappist monastery in Kentucky. He became a monk, a writer, a mystic, and a really brilliant social critic. But what's super fascinating about Merton is how he essentially built a bridge between Western and Eastern wisdom traditions, stuff like Buddhism, Taoism, and Zen. And he wasn't just, collecting religions like fridge magnets. He was digging deep into what they revealed about the human mind. The guy was an unexpected visionary. He literally predicted our modern identity crisis decades before a smartphone ever even existed. Section 1. The noise inside. This really gets at the tragedy of modern life. So Merton believed that we become so incredibly busy constructing an identity that we literally forget who we actually are. See, we tend to confuse external silence with internal silence. Like you could be sitting in a completely quiet forest. Your phone is at 5% battery, but you're still having 500 frantic conversations inside your head. True internal silence, at least the way Merton described it, means no performance, no pretending, no chasing anyone's approval, and most importantly, no endless, exhausting conversation with yourself. Which brings us to Section 2, the false self trap, and how we go about constructing this identity. Think about your own life for just a moment. You've got a name, a profession, a certain status. But how much of our daily energy goes into protecting that identity rather than actually knowing who we are at our core? This right here is what Merton called the false self. It's basically a constructed social personality built on your achievements, your status, external opinions that we mistakenly believe is our actual identity. Here's why that's so dangerous. If you say, I am a successful person, and then, God forbid, you lose your job, well, your entire identity collapses. If your whole identity is tied up in being beautiful, what happens when you naturally age? Or if you think you're the smartest person in the room, what happens when you inevitably meet someone smarter? Look, the problem isn't having achievements. The problem is mistaking those achievements for who you actually are. Heck, even trying to be humble can just become another performance for the ego. Now, let's bring this into today's world. Obviously, Merton lived way before social media, but can you imagine what he'd say about Instagram or TikTok? We don't just live life anymore, do we? We document it. We don't just eat a nice dinner, we photograph the dinner. We don't just go on a trip, we post about it to prove to everyone that we traveled. The false self absolutely craves an audience. And social media, well, it turns the entire world into a stage. You can literally spend years building this online identity that looks flawless, while privately you feel completely disconnected from yourself. It's a huge paradox. The more energy you spend convincing the world that you're somebody online, the less time you actually spend discovering who you are offline. To really wrap our heads around this, let's use Merton's onion metaphor. Think of your identity like a giant onion, filled up layer after layer. On the very outside, you have those social labels, your job, your nationality, your status. Now peel that back. Underneath, you find internal traits, your childhood conditioning, your fears, your ambitions. But if you keep peeling, what's actually left at the core?
When you strip away all those labels and identifications, who are you? Merton argued that true transformation isn't about adding more labels or achievements to yourself. It's actually about removing what isn't really you. You might have a job, but you are not your job.
So let's look at section 3, the power of silence. This is Merton's ultimate solution to the false self.
How do we actually peel back those layers? Well, Merton repeatedly came back to contemplation and profound silence as the ultimate antidote. Think of it like a lake. When the surface of the water is constantly being whipped up by the wind, it's all disturbed and you can't see what's underneath. But when that water finally becomes still, you can see straight down into the depths. Your thoughts are those waves. Silence doesn't mean you have to somehow destroy the waves or force your mind to be perfectly blank. That's basically impossible anyway. It just means creating enough inner space to let them settle naturally, so you can finally look beneath the surface.
And when we do this, there is this incredible psychological shift that happens. For example, instead of thinking, I'm a failure, try shifting that to, I'm noticing the thought that I'm a failure. It's such a tiny tweak in language, but wow, it creates a massive psychological distance. Look, your brain is a thought-generating machine. It's always running. But that doesn't mean every thought it spits out is the truth. By observing the thought rather than becoming it, you take back control. The mind is a fantastic instrument, but it makes a terrible master.
But here's the million-dollar question. If silence is so good for us, why are we all so addicted to the noise? Notice what happens when you suddenly have nothing to do. You instinctively reach right for your phone, don't you? Why? Because boredom is just the very first layer of silence. Just beneath that boredom hides all the stuff we really don't want to deal with. Fear, loneliness, regret, insecurity, maybe even some unresolved grief. We use constant noise, scrolling, working, shopping, talking, to basically turn the lights off in a messy room so we don't have to look at the mess. Merton's whole approach is asking us to bravely flip those lights back on.
Which brings us to our final section, part 4, the modern framework. Let's make this actionable for today.
So how do we actually put all this into practice? Let's break down the first 4 actionable steps, which are deeply inspired by his masterpiece, New Seeds of Contemplation. Step 1, create silence. Try spending just 10 to 20 minutes a day totally away from your phone or any media. You're not trying to force some grand mystical experience here. The goal is simply to stop force-feeding your mind for a few minutes. Step 2, observe the false self. Catch yourself in the act and ask, what image am I trying to protect right now? Step 3, separate thought from reality. Use that I am noticing the thought technique we just talked about. And step 4, practice solitude. Spend some actual time alone without any entertainment to distract you. Honestly, it's going to feel pretty uncomfortable at first, kind of like quitting sugar, but your mind has habits, and those habits absolutely can be broken. But I really want to highlight step 5 here because it is absolutely crucial. Do one thing without performing. Let the action exist without an audience. This is so incredibly powerful. I challenge you to do something good today. Help someone out, create a piece of art, read a book, forgive someone, and just do not post about it. Don't announce it. Don't take a selfie doing it. Don't turn it into content. Just let the action exist entirely without an audience. Doing this directly starves the false self, and it actively weakens your ego's absolute addiction to recognition.
Now, a quick aside, just to be clear, Merton wasn't saying we should hate success. Not at all. He was just warning us against building a successful false self. It's the huge difference between just accomplishing external goals and paying attention to who you are actually becoming. Because you can become extremely wealthy or super famous and still remain completely internally bankrupt and disconnected from yourself. You can literally accomplish every single goal in your vision board, only to realize you spent your whole life climbing the wrong mountain. So the deeper question isn't how much have I achieved, it's who am I becoming while I'm achieving it? So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the Merton test. These are some deeply profound questions to reflect on tonight, maybe when you find a quiet space. Ask yourself, what am I constantly trying to prove? What am I afraid people will discover about me? What would I do differently if literally nobody could ever see me? And finally, what noise am I using to avoid myself? Just let the gravity of those questions sink in for a minute. Seriously, don't rush to answer them right away. sometimes the most important answers only arrive after the question itself has had time to become quiet. And finally, ask yourself this one last thing. Who might I become if I stopped performing and started living? This really brings us full circle to Merton's ultimate paradox. He entered a monastery to seek solitude and withdraw from the noisy world, and yet he somehow became one of the loudest, most influential spiritual voices of the modern age. Stepping back into silence doesn't make you disappear. Actually, it might be the only way to return to the world honestly. The world is constantly screaming at you, trying to tell you who you should become. Silence? Silence finally gives you a chance to discover who you already are.